The Silver Grass Circle of Valbonne by Jade Maître. 3 steps off the soft-footed path that winds through the leaning trees in the Valbonne forest. Cast aside with light hand the heavy fronds of tongue fern, duck beneath them, and then stop short. Beware, take not one step further, for the furze hides a glistening grass circle, at first mistaken for snail constellation or dewdrops. But it is neither of these things. It is the silver grass circle. The elves own it, and it is not to be stepped in, not for love nor money. This is what Freya and Matteo heard. They knew it from their grandparents and neighbours. It was known in the schoolyard and village square. They knew not to step in the silver grass circle, nor sneak beneath fern, nor even follow the soft-barked path that wound through the deep, high Valbonne forest. They must stay on their farms or play by the river. Never wander the forest of Valbonne. But Matteo was curious. He was the kind of boy who liked to pull apart flowers to study the magic that turned them from bud to bloom. He would watch for hours until the night lark made its sunfall swoop to the church turret and called its evening song. He could not resist knowing what the silver grass circle looked like and knowing why it was forbidden. One morning, Freya breakfasted and ran to the island on the river where she met Matteo every morning. But he wasn't there. Nor was he by the old rope where they leapt into the wild waters when they raged in autumn, nor in the dark caves where they wrote their names in blue mud from the riverbank. But a trail of silver grass ran along the broken road and into the forest. Freya knew where her cousin had gone. She bravely walked the path which wound through the leaning trees in Valbonne forest, took 3 steps off the soft-footed path, cast aside with light hand the heavy fronds of tongue fern, ducked beneath them, and did not stop short, did not beware. She saw amidst thyme and heather the glistening circle, not mistaken for snail constellation nor dewdrops. It was the silver grass circle. She stepped inside it. Time slipped like bare toes on a rotting leaf. A strange music strained at the edges of Freya's ears, seemed to tickle the skin on her neck. There, on a toadstool, in the perfect centre of the silver grass circle, sat an elf, wispy thin, with fingers like winding reeds, eyes as black as caves. He tapped his wily shoes of carved chestnuts, and his smile scampered over his funny face. Freya startled and leapt back, but it was as though a wall of glass surrounded her. The silver grass circle had raised its magic and locked her in. She could not escape. "Are you here for the dance?" cried the elf, and at the words 100 creatures descended upon the circle from the trees and hollow logs. They seeped up through the wet grass like worms. And Freya found her arms lifting high, knees flying, hands shaking as though she rattled a giant bell, legs dancing by themselves as round and round the merry-go-round the music lifted and a burst of piano accordion, a cloud of flute, raised itself to frantic melody. The creatures danced, and so did Freya, round and round again, and she could not escape. "Sing with the crow," the creatures laughed, all at once, all together, like a choreographed opera. And the crow warbled a song of longing, of life outside the silver grass circle. But because the creatures only guessed at it, it held all sorts of strange details. The crow sang of yellow rivers and leaf-green skies, of groves where the moon lived when it wasn't glowing, of thoughts people had when their faces weren't showing. Freya went to shout out, but this strange garbled song lifted out from her chest, and now she sang along. What to do? She could not find her cousin when her body danced without her. She was tiring too, and little lights frolicked before her blinking eyes. She could not make out the beasts from the elves, the moon from distant church, the owls from the linnets, the trees from themselves. Just when Freya thought her legs on the cusp of crumpling like a dropped marionette, The High King of the Elves stepped from between shadowed mushrooms, his cloak made of river skin, a quiver of arrows tucked in at the pleats of his sleek pantaloons. "You are not one of us," he said, curious at her springy humanness, her hair, her opaque skin. He reached out a finger and touched her nose, then jumped. "It is cold," he pronounced. "You have a cold nose." And she did, for although she sweated with her exertions, the sweat was cold and chilled her, and she realized it was no longer morning but night time, though she could not say how it had happened. How the sun had slipped a whole rotation through the sky, and the black horizon had birthed a moon which shone impassively upon the circle party, which now paused and stared at her, all with black, hungry eyes. "I am cold," said Freya, "and I don't want to dance. I want only to find my cousin Matteo. I know he was here. Did you see him? He's about my size, and we have the same hair." But the King of the Elves, who was known as Aubrey, was accustomed to bargains more than favours. "What will you give me if I know," he said to Freya, "if I know where he is and what you must do to reclaim him? What is it of value that you can give me?" Freya looked all around her, but she had danced her dress to rags. Her shoes had flown off her feet. She was covered only in threads and webbing. She thought, and then she whispered something in the Elf King's ear. He nodded. They shook hands. The bargain was made. She leaned down and whispered again. What spilled from her lips? It was steam rising from hills, the music of water thundering down swollen river, the sweet chirp of birds, the smell of tea in an iron pot, of onions cooking, and rain falling, and fire crackling. It was every memory Freya had, her first favourite book, the pet cat she loved, the laughter of her mother. It was all the things the elves could not possibly know in their grassy circle, their wild music and follies. It was quiet moments, slipstream moments, trickles of beauty that only came to you when all was calm and the world was right. And the gift given, suddenly Matteo appeared. He was covered in feathers and dressed as an owl. He looked as people do upon waking, a little startled, for his dancing already seemed vaporous, as dreams are, and changing shape even as he thought of it. Freya too was sleepy. She hugged him but did not know why she was doing it. Slowly they walked back home together. On arriving back in the village, time had passed. 30 years, all told, and the children could not understand why. Their school friends were now parents, their parents were now old. Night and day, moons and seasons, all this had spun and faster spun as they danced in the silver grass circle. But their memories were fading, and after a time they forgot about the circle and made new friends, and all was done. They only remembered one thing, which they murmured with certainty any time a person would ask. Do not take 3 steps off the soft-footed path that winds through the leaning trees in the Valbonne forest. Beware of the silver grass circle. It is not to be stepped in, not for love nor money. The end.